Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing the nightclub book tag. This was created by Brian Bell over at BellTube, and I was tagged by Darko over at Kendalls and Kicks. So let's go ahead and jump in really quick here. And the first question is cocktail hour. Name a book that you think pairs perfectly with your favorite drink. Now, this is a really basic answer, but my favorite drink happens to be water, and I think the book that pairs perfectly with that, because it is probably the most basic answer of all time for fantasy, is the Lord of the Rings. Now, that's not a slight towards the Lord of the Rings, obviously very impactful fantasy series. It's a series that I like, I don't love. I think a lot of people like it a lot more than I do, but that is a pretty basic answer for a pretty basic series. Question number 2 is Neon Lights. Name a book with a cover that immediately grabbed your attention like bright lights in a club. That is a tongue twister, and I messed saying that up several times already. My answer for that is Godkiller by Hannah Kanner. This is book 1 of a trilogy. I don't know, this has been my favorite cover for like 2 or 3 years. I think 2 years. I think it's about 2 years old, but this is my favorite cover for the past 2 years. Absolutely brilliant. I just think all of the framing of it looks great with the way the words are, the deer. I don't know, it all just looks really cool. And you know, brown isn't normally a color that you think would like grab your attention, but for whatever reason, I think it looks really well done here. Number 3, The Bouncer. What book did you have to put down because it just wasn't letting you in? And I actually have 2 answers for this. The first one, and I have this bad habit of, I don't DNF books. I keep pushing through even when I probably should DNF them. That maybe will be a challenge for myself next year. But the first book I want to mention is The Ships of Merior. This book took me 274 days to finish. Some of that was just me not reading it. Some of it was me just reading a page or 2 a day. There's a lot going on with this series. I do think this is a series that lends itself to being read very slow, but like I said, 274 days is maybe a little bit of an overkill. I do have a review. I think that's the title of it, is how many days it took me to read it. And the other honorable mention that I want to shout out real quick is Memories of Ice. I have been stuck at about 50% of the way through that book for quite a while now. Once again, I'm enjoying it. It's a series, Malazan in general, that asks a lot of its readers, so that is kind of where I am with those 2. I think those are 2 pretty good answers for me as somebody who doesn't DNF. Next up is the DJ's Choice. What book would you recommend as the perfect read for somebody new to the fantasy genre? So I actually have 3 options here, and they're all depending on the person, but I think these 3 will have a decent reach for depending on who the person you recommended is. The first gut instinct is obviously Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This just kind of opens the door to a whole lot of fantasy, very popular fantasy. Sanderson is a very big name in fantasy, just so much stuff. And Sanderson in general has a lot of variety inside of his writings that you could like point people to. But this is kind of like the gold standard. This is where you start. So many people talk about how this is the book that got them back into adult fantasy reading. I would also like to mention Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I think that is another option to maybe point somebody in, maybe somebody who has an inkling to Norse mythology or is more interested in that kind of stuff. Also, the cover is just amazing, that giant dragon on it. It's pretty easy to pull somebody in. And the last one I'm going to mention is Empire of the Vampire. I will say this is definitely for somebody who wants to push that grimdark boundary. If you know that is something that they're probably going to like. This is maybe a little bit of a wild card because of some of the things that happened pretty early on in that book, but I do think that across those 3, those are pretty good recommendations for a lot of people. Prompt number 5 is Disco Ball. Name a book that made you feel like you were part of a vibrant, glittering world. And I'm gonna have to say The Wheel of Time, Rand Land. I did not read as much words about the way people are dressed and how many buttons they have and all kinds of things like that to not feel like I'm there in a very vibrant colored world. There are so much time spent on describing things that in general probably don't need to be described. Kind of like George R.R. Martin does with his feast scenes, where he like describes the food in way more details than you need. Robert Jordan does that with how people are dressed. Probably my favorite fantasy series of all time anyway, but definitely feel like I'm there. It definitely feels like a vibrant world, even though there is some dark stuff going on. Next up is the Dance Floor Diva. What book had you dancing with excitement from the first page to the last? So I will mention The Never-Ending End of the World by Anne Christie, a very fast-paced book with a really interesting hook that kind of gets you drawn in. I did not want to put this book down from start to finish. I wanted to know what the mystery was going on and how to get all of that figured out. I do think that the ending is very satisfying, so it does kind of get that good payoff. I will also mention Project Hail Mary from the very beginning. That book had me hook, line, and sinker, and both of these are 2 of my favorite books that I read last year. Next up is the guest list. Which author would you invite to an exclusive book-themed party and why? And this is going to seem like a little bit of a wild card, but I'm going to go with Ian Fleming, and this would have have to be a James Bond themed party, so very suave and sophisticated with gambling and drinks and everything going around. But I just think Ian Fleming would be a very interesting person. There's a new biography about him that I have some interest in reading, and it's like a massive book. I think the audiobook is like 34 hours. So I didn't know this at the time when I started reading James Bond, but Ian Fleming didn't even start writing the series until he was very close to like dying. I think he wrote those all within like 15-ish years right before his death, which I think just shows that he probably led a pretty interesting life. And so I think getting to rub elbows with Ian Fleming would be pretty interesting. Next up is the VIP entrance. Which books do you feel privileged to read before it became wildly popular? So I actually have two answers here, and we're going to go back to the well of Janny Wirtz with the Wars of Light and Shadow. Now this is starting to get a little more popular in our little corner of BookTube here, but this is a series that I think as it gains more and more traction, people will appreciate it. I don't know if this is ever going to be the series that gets as much acclaim as the other series I'm going to mention in here, because I think this is a much more complex series that asks a little bit more of its readers. But in general, I think this is a very powerful series, and it will be, talked about with like the Malazans of the world and everything. Very, very glad that I can be kind of on the forefront of that. Like I said, I have only read 3 books, but it is a series that I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the curve here. And this is a little bit of a cheat, but I'm going to actually talk about Stormlight here, because while this is extremely popular in like the fantasy sphere, outside of like the hardcore readers and stuff, nobody knows what this series is. Like if I went and asked my friends, hey, have you ever heard of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson? They're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. So I think that it won't be too long until Sanderson starts getting adaptations. And once that happens, I think the popularity is going to absolutely skyrocket. And so for all of us who have been here this whole time while the Cosmere is getting, the ball rolling and everything, I think we're all going to have that same kind of feeling that A Song of Ice and Fire fans had, who read all of the books way before the TV show came out. I feel like that's how we're going to have a similar reaction to Stormlight, Mistborn, any of them. I particularly, Mistborn is Stormlight is my favorite out of all of those. I think this will start with Mistborn, but I think, this is the real gem of the Cosmere. Next up is Midnight Read. What's a book you couldn't put down and ended up reading all night? And this goes back a really long way. This is the first one that popped into my head, and that is Order of the Phoenix, book 5 of Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I can vividly remember like laying in my bed as a kid and staying up way too late and kind of sneak reading this all night, and then absolutely being so tired in the next day because I read I forget, I was trying to finish the book that night because I was so into it, and I ended up staying up way too late, got like no sleep, was miserable the next day, but stayed up super long to finish Order of the Phoenix. The penultimate prompt here is After Party. What book left you with a hangover, unable to start a new read immediately after finishing it? And I'm gonna have to go ahead and say my favorite book of all time, Death's End. There are just some monumental things that happen in this book. This is a book that really pushed my brain to its limits with some of the concepts and ideas that are going on here. I know some people think that the latter half of this book is a little bit weaker, and maybe it is. Maybe I am looking back on it with rose-tinted glasses, but this is still a book and series really in general that I think about a lot. And definitely after I finished this, I wasn't sure what else I could read that could push me to the same kind of limits that this has. And I honestly don't think I have read anything that pushed me the same way or opened up my eyes to the universe in the ways you could look at it as this series has. But that doesn't mean something won't, and I probably am missing some very fundamental pieces of literature that could be in that same kind of sphere. But this is still a very special book. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to read, and all these years later, I still haven't gotten something that I think is better than this book. So I think that does speak to the permanent hangover I am in after reading Death's End. And the last prompt is Late Night Conversations. Which book left you thinking deeply or wanting to discuss it with others late into the night? Well, I could use Death's End again here for this, but actually the book I'm going to use is Tiamat's Wrath, and that is my second favorite book of all time. That is book 8 of The Expanse, and that is a book that when I finished it, it just felt like it was a book that was written for me. Pretty much every major plot point that happened in that book is something that I wanted to happen, and it just all of the puzzle pieces fit so perfectly together, and I absolutely love that. It's one of the only, if not the only, spoiler review I have done on this entire channel. I think there's like a 30-minute long video of me just absolutely ranting and raving about Tiamat's Wrath, and it's one of my earliest videos too, and that I think that just shows how much I really liked that book and how much I just needed to talk about it because, once again, it was just such a special book. But that is the Nightclub book tag. I hope you liked it. If you want to do it, go ahead and let me know down in the comments for all of your prompts, or if you have a channel, I would be more than honored for you to go ahead and do it and let me know if you do. But that's for me, and as always, have a good one.